George Kennan was an American diplomat and historian. He is famous for his work in shaping the United States foreign policy during the 20th century, especially during the Cold War. Kennan was born in 1904 in the United States. He grew up in a world that was changing quickly, with new ideas and tensions between countries. He became one of the most important figures in American diplomacy, and is remembered for his role in the development of the U.S. policy of containment. In the early years of his life, Kennan showed an interest in history and languages. He studied history at Princeton University, where he learned about different countries and their relationships. After he graduated, he joined the U.S. Foreign Service, which is a job that allows diplomats to work in other countries and represent their own country. Kennan's first assignment took him to Europe, where he began to learn about the political and social issues of the time. In the 1930s, Kennan was sent to the Soviet Union, which was a country that was very different from the United States. The Soviet Union was under the rule of Joseph Stalin, and its government had a communist system. Kennan spent many years in Moscow, observing the Soviet government and its actions. He learned a great deal about the Soviet system and its goals. Kennan believed that the Soviet Union was a threat to the world, and that its leaders wanted to spread communism to other countries. Kennan's experiences in the Soviet Union helped him develop an important idea that would shape U.S. policy for many years. He argued that the United States needed to contain the spread of communism by stopping it from growing in other countries. Kennan believed that if the United States could prevent communism from expanding, the Soviet Union would eventually weaken. This idea became known as containment. Kennan wrote a long telegram, known as the Long Telegram, which explained his thoughts on the Soviet Union and the best way for the United States to respond. The Long Telegram was sent in 1946, and it was a key document in the development of American foreign policy during the Cold War. Kennan's message was clear: the Soviet Union was not just another country, but an enemy of freedom and democracy. He believed that the United States had to stand firm against the Soviet Union, not by going to war, but by using economic and political power to resist the spread of communism. This approach became the foundation of U.S. policy during the Cold War. Kennan's ideas had a great influence on U.S. foreign policy in the years that followed. In the late 1940s, the United States began to adopt policies based on containment. One of the most important of these policies was the Marshall Plan, which provided economic aid to European countries to help them rebuild after World War II. The Marshall Plan was seen as a way to stop the spread of communism by making European countries stronger and more stable. The United States also helped to create military alliances, such as NATO, to defend against Soviet aggression. Although Kennan's ideas were very influential, he did not always agree with the way the United States carried out its foreign policy. He was often critical of the way the U.S. government responded to the Soviet Union. For example, Kennan did not support the U.S. involvement in the Korean War or the Vietnam War. He believed that these wars were not the right way to contain communism, and that they could lead to more problems. Kennan was also concerned about the growing military power of the United States, and the risk of becoming involved in conflicts that were not in the country's best interest. Despite these disagreements, Kennan remained an important figure in American diplomacy. He continued to work as a diplomat and a scholar, and he wrote many books and articles about history and international relations. Kennan's ideas about containment were influential during the Cold War, but he also warned about the dangers of overusing military force and the importance of diplomacy in resolving conflicts. Kennan retired from government work in the 1950s and spent much of his time writing and teaching. He taught at various universities and became a respected scholar. In his later years, Kennan was critical of U.S. foreign policy, especially during the Vietnam War. He believed that the U.S. was making many mistakes in its attempts to stop the spread of communism. Kennan argued that diplomacy and careful decision-making were more important than military action. He wrote about his views in books such as American Diplomacy, which became an important work for understanding U.S. foreign policy. George Kennan's ideas helped shape the way the United States dealt with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. His work on containment was a central part of U.S. policy for many years. Even though Kennan did not agree with every decision made by the U.S. government, his influence on American diplomacy was lasting. His emphasis on the importance of understanding other countries and using diplomacy to solve problems has remained relevant for many years. Kennan's career was one of deep thought and careful analysis. He believed in the power of ideas to shape the world, and he worked hard to understand the complex issues of international relations. His life shows the importance of careful thinking in foreign policy, and he is remembered as one of the most important diplomats in American history. In his later years, Kennan continued to reflect on his work and the events of the Cold War. He believed that the United States should have taken a more cautious approach to its role in the world. He often warned about the dangers of getting involved in too many conflicts, and emphasized the importance of dialogue and negotiation. Despite the disagreements he had with some aspects of U.S. foreign policy, Kennan's contributions to the field of international relations are still studied and respected today. George Kennan passed away in 2005 at the age of 101. His life and work continue to inspire diplomats, historians, and scholars around the world. His ideas about diplomacy, containment, and the role of the United States in global affairs are still relevant, and his legacy as one of the most important American diplomats of the 20th century endures. Through his long career, Kennan showed that diplomacy is not just about making deals or taking sides. It is about understanding the world, analyzing situations carefully, and using wisdom to guide decisions. He taught the world that foreign policy should be based on careful thinking, respect for other nations, and a commitment to peace. His contributions to international relations will be remembered for many years to come.